Okay, thank you, Sibitsu. Soti everyone, and welcome back to our study group with Venerable Dhamma. Today we will continue with our reading of the book by Mahasi Sayadaw on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Before we start reading, we will take together the 5 precepts as a reminder of what is good and how to lead our lives. And we do it each time together with the precepts on screen on the YouTube, so you will be able to read it along. You can say it out loud, and if you're on Discord, you can keep yourself muted, but that's how we take the precepts together. Is there someone who'd like to lead the precepts for us today?
I would like to.
Thank you, San. You may start.
Aham bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Dutiyampi aham bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami. Tatiyampi aham bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisaranagamanang nititang.
Ama bante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kāmesu micchācārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kāmesu micchācārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjappamaddatthāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura meraya Majapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani silena sugating yanti silena bhoga sampada silena nibbutiং yanti tasma silang visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So before we start reading, and for those on the YouTube chat, you can already write questions, but we will read them only after we finished with reading for 1 hour. And for those who are reading, please remember to read slowly. We read each 2 paragraphs. If they're very short, you can read another one. And please take a pause in between each paragraphs so there's time for questions or for explanations. We are at the topic of the noble quest. It's a bit difficult to navigate around the file, but we will show it on screen, so you should be able to follow along. And the last reader was Zach, so
Can't just zoom the text in, it's pretty small.
is that better, Bante?
Better.
Since the last reader was Zach, I think it's your turn, Austin. And you can start if you don't know where we are at. Let's start with, this was a denunciation. Austin, if you're talking, we cannot hear you. This was a denunciation or stricture of the life of pleasure he had lived with Yasodhaya amidst the gay society of attendant princesses. Then, having perceived the wretchedness of such life, he made up his mind to go in search of the peace of Nibbana, which is free from birth, old age, disease, and death. He said, having perceived the wretchedness of being myself subject to birth, old age, it occurred to me it would be fitting if I were to seek the incomparable, unsurpassed peace of Nibbana, free from birth and old age.
Yeah, your text is not the same as the text we're seeing on screen. There are at least 2 versions of this text. One has been edited and I think even abridged, so it's a little smoother, but I think it doesn't have everything in it, and it's not in the format, the original published format. I think that's the one that's on screen.
Yes, it seems like that's the case.
Not the one we had last week.
Subitsu, are you able to change the text?
So we're talking about the introduction to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Remember, he mentioned that there are 3 kinds of introduction. And so we're talking about what led up in this last life of the Bodhisattva, what led up to the event of teaching the first discourse. So when he was a prince, he saw an old man, a sick man, an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and then he saw a monk, an ascetic, and decided that he would go forth. Although it doesn't say anything about the ascetic here, so there's different versions of that story. Anyway, he pondered, in this version he pondered what he should do, because this path that he was on was obviously not leading to an outcome that would prepare him for death, for the realities that he was seeing in front of him, realizing this old age will come to me one day, this sickness will come to me one day, this death will come to me one day, and I'm not prepared for it in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I'm setting myself up for a lot of stress and suffering because of my addiction to those things that are also subject to old age, sickness, and death.
Thus it occurred to the Bodhisattva to go in quest of Nibbanic peace, which is free from old age, disease, and death. That was a very laudable aim, and we shall consider it further to see clearly how it was so. Austin, you can try if it works now. Okay, it seems like it doesn't work. Edit, you can go on.
Okay. Suppose there was someone who was already old and decrepit. Would it be wise for him to seek the company of another man or woman who, like himself, was aged and frail, or of someone who thought, though not advanced in age, yet would surely turn old in no time? No, not at all judicious.
In other words, depending on such people. Or the idea is relying on them for your happiness, for your well-being. As like everything else in this life, they are subject to old age, sickness, and death themselves. It's just that in the long run, in the bigger picture, these things cannot be a true refuge. Not people, not possessions, not even your own body.
Again, for someone who was himself in declining health and suffering, it would be quite irrational if he were to seek for companionship in another who was ill and afflicted with painful disease. Companionship with someone who, though enjoying good health presently, would soon be troubled with illness, would not be prudent either. There are even those who, hoping to enjoy each other's company for life, go into wedlock and settle down. Unfortunately, one of the partners soon becomes a bedridden invalid, imposing on the other the onerous duty of looking after the sickened mate. The hope of a happy married life may be dashed when one of the partners passes away, leaving only sorrow and lamentation for the bereaved one. Ultimately, both of the couple would be faced with the misery of old age, disease, and death.
And this isn't a surprise. He's not saying anything new. He's just pointing out that the narrative that we are taught and the cultural norms that we subscribe to have a flaw. And this is something that it's very difficult to see, something that the Bodhisattva saw. It's the way he's presenting it, Mahasi Sayadaw is presenting it here, is as though it's something that should be a revelation to all of us, but we're all so mired in sensuality for the most part that it doesn't resonate in the way that it did with the Bodhisattva. And we have to struggle to appreciate the danger that we're in and the limitation that we're putting on our own well-being and our happiness. It is a revolutionary teaching, but hard to see. I mean, it sounds like he's just pointing out the reality of human life, which we're all kind of resigned to, and for the most part, people go into marriage because they say, "Until death do us part," so they know that death is a thing. But the misunderstanding is that somehow it's worth it. Somehow there's a benefit to the romantic attachment. There are benefits, of course, to friendship and companionship. That there are wholesome qualities that can be cultivated. Of course, that's not why we get married. We don't get married generally because we're looking for a person to uplift us spiritually, right? If we were, we wouldn't. I don't think marriage is the form that we would decide upon. But instead, we spend our time sinking deeper and deeper into the addiction to sensuality, or at the very least, just wasting years and years of our lives on the struggles of a family and a household, the household life, working and building up a life and the household and following the narrative, the cultural norm of companionship, and so on, and as well as all the other cultural norms that we engage in, acquiring wealth and possessions and preening our and caring for our bodies. Just the amount of time and effort we spend on all of this worldly business. Even if it doesn't mire us down in sensuality, we've just wasted all this time that we could better have spent doing what the Bodhisattva is pondering now, finding a path to true peace and happiness and freedom from suffering. Something on the bigger picture that surpasses or goes beyond or is bigger than death, bigger than life.
Thus, it is extremely unwise to go after sensual pleasures, which are subject to old age, disease, and death. The most noble quest is to seek out what is not subject to old age, disease, and death. Here at this meditation center, it is a matter for gratification that the devotees, monks, and laymen are all engaged in the noblest quest, the quest for the unaging, the unailing, and the deathless.
Yes, it's a matter of much gratification and appreciation and a happiness to see people engaging in the practice find something better, something greater, something truly meaningful, something that can truly be a refuge. Meditation practice. Cultivate the building of a meditation center, even just the spreading of the teaching, sharing of the meditation practice with others. Such an important part of being a Buddhist. Such a great and noble gift. Great to see people practicing and supporting the meditation practice.
The renunciation of the Bodhisattva.
The renunciation of the Buddha. On his fourth scourge.
Sorry, she can read another paragraph. We read 2 paragraphs each. Lisa, you can continue.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. The renunciation of the Bodhisattva. On his fourth excursion of the pleasure grove, the Bodhisattva met with a monk. On learning from the monk that he had gone forth from the worldly life and was engaged in meritorious pursuits, it occurred to the Bodhisattva to renounce the world, become a recluse, and go in search of what is not subject to old age, disease, and death. When he had gained what he had set out for, his intention was to pass on the knowledge to the world so that other beings would also learn to be free from misery of being subject to old age, disease, and death. A noble thought, a noble intention indeed.
Yeah, the thing that a meditation teacher loves the most is seeing other people teaching meditation. Of course, people practicing meditation is the most important, but obviously the presence of teachers is necessary for that to happen. So you become keenly aware of the fact that there are never going to be enough meditation teachers, people who are passing on the Buddha's teaching, passing on the meditation practice. I mean, that's the kind of vibe that I get from this, from his hinting again and again, or referring again and again to the meditation center, because these talks were given to meditators at various meditation centers. So he's referring to the audience and the location of giving these talks. But it's the kind of thing that, of course, I can resonates with me, that he should again and again praise and appreciate those who spread the teaching. Meaning, besides him, it's like he's not praising himself. Obviously, it's not like I'm great because I'm a teacher. It's like, hey, you guys are great, and I hope more of you start to spread the teaching, because that's what a teacher wants. Their students to spread it to others as well.
On that same day, about the same time, his son was born to his consort Yasodhara Devi. When he heard the news, the Bodhisattva murmured, "An impediment, Rahula, has been born. A fetter has been born." On learning this remark of the Bodhisattva, his sire King Suddhodana caused his newborn grandson to be named Prince Rahula, Prince Impediment, hoping that the child would indeed prove to be a fetter to the Bodhisattva and become a hindrance to his plan of renunciation.
Suddhodana eventually becomes a Sotapanna. He's a good guy, he's not a bad guy. Yasodhara's father, on the other hand, goes to hell. He's a bad guy. But Suddhodana was a good one. But he loved his son and his grandson very much. He was very much a worldly sort of person, and didn't have bad intent, but could only appreciate the value of sensuality, or the happiness of sensuality, and so was horrified at the thought of his son not being able to partake of the inheritance that was rightfully his. I mean, this is a father wants to pass on his treasures to his son.
I think King Suddhodana became an Arahant before he died.
Arahant, huh?
Yeah,
That's
I
not
think
how I remember it.
on his deathbed, he was listening to Venerable Sariputta giving a sermon, and then he asked why I haven't heard a sermon like this before. Then Venerable Sariputta said, the Buddha doesn't give sermons, this kind of sermons, to people who wear white clothes, something like that. I'm just paraphrasing.
Sounds familiar. Sounds familiar. But he became an Arahant, huh?
But the Bodhisattva had become averse to the pleasures of the world. That night he remained unmoved, unsolaced by the amusement provided by the royal entertainers, and went into an early slumber. The discouraged musicians laid down their instruments and went to sleep then and there. The sight of recumbent sleeping dancers, which met him on awakening in the middle of the night, repulsed him and made his magnificent palace apartment seem like a cemetery filled with corpses.
Thus, at midnight, the Bodhisattva went forth on the great retirement, riding the royal horse Kandaka, and accompanied by his courtier Chana. When they came to the river Anoma, he cut off his hair and beard while standing on the sandy beach. Then, after discarding the royal garments, he put on the yellow robes offered by the Brahma god Gatikara and became a monk. The Bodhisattva was only 29 then, an age most favorable for the pursuit of pleasures, that he renounced with indifference the pomp and splendor of a sovereign and abandoned the solace and comfort of his consort Yasodhara and retinues at such a favorable age while still blessed with youth is rarely awe-inspiring.
Yeah, in the time of the Buddha, it was common for people to leave home when they were old. So he may be referring to that. Mahasi Sayadaw, I think, was ordained since he was very young, so it's not unheard of in modern times, but in the Buddha's time it was very rare. People would only really usually leave the home life when they got older. It was we understand that it was or became a sort of a part of the culture too. When he got too old to work, he would leave home to go and live in the forest. Gatikara was a potter in a past life. Gatikara means one who makes pots. There's a story about him if you want to learn it.
Making his way to Āļāra, the great ascetic. At that time, the Bodhisattva was not yet in possession of practical knowledge of leading a holy life. So he made his way to the then famous ascetic Āļāra, who was no ordinary person. Of the 8 stages of mundane jhanic attainments, he had personally mastered 7 stages up to the jhana consciousness dwelling on nothingness, Akichanayatana jhana, and was imparting this knowledge to his pupils.
Before the appearance of the Buddha, such teachers who had achieved jhanic attainments served as trustworthy masters, giving practical instructions on methods of attainments. Āļāra was famous like a Buddha in those times. The Theravada literature was silent about him. However, in Lalita Vistara, a biological text of the Northern School of Buddhism, it was recorded that the great teacher had lived in the state of Vesali and that he had 300 pupils learning his doctrine.
Yeah, some people have said that these guys didn't teach jhana. People trying to claim that only the Buddha taught jhana is. The thing is, there are beliefs that you can hold because something isn't explicitly stated in the text, but it's a really hard one to hold. The idea that what these guys didn't teach, what these guys taught wasn't jhana, because Bodhisattva explicitly says that their teachings lead to jhana, lead to, as he will say, I think he will recite, he will let us know in the further paragraphs, but he realizes for himself that what these guys taught leads to the arupa jhanas. So, I mean, it's an important point that jhana, samatha jhana, meaning meditation that leads to an absorbed state, a fixed singleness, single-pointedness of mind, did exist before the Buddha, does exist outside of Buddhism today, and will exist after the Buddha, after Buddhism is no more. Seems unreasonable to think otherwise. So, I mean, the important point there really is that Buddhist meditation isn't simply the practice of focusing the mind to become calm and peaceful. Buddhism is something more, and well, I won't spoil it, but if you know the story, he realizes that he has further to go, which is something important for us to understand when we practice meditation, that it's not simply to feel peaceful and calm, and for a greater and deeper peace and happiness and freedom from suffering, we have to be willing to let go even of peaceful and calm states. We have to challenge ourselves to face all states and to let go of everything, including the pleasurable ones.
Yeah, if they didn't attend jhana, how were they born in the arupa realms? You have to attain the jhanas to be born in arupa realms. There's no other way to go there. So that's a false
Right, but
argument there.
you speaking like that, you're speaking as a person who believes in a lot of texts that are not the suttas. And a lot of what you're saying isn't explicitly found in the suttas. So this is the problem, is that as soon as you discard the Theravada tradition, you open the doors to lots of new interpretations. It was because there was this well-known teacher espousing this view, and he's quite famous actually. And I wrote a whole article on it and then ended up removing the article because people didn't like reading it.
Taking instructions from the holy sage Āļāra. How Bodhisattva took instructions from the holy sage Āļāra was described thus: having gone forth and become a recluse in pursuit of what is holy and good, seeking the supreme, incomparable peace of Nibbana, I drew to where Āļāra Kālāma was and addressed him thus: Friend Kālāma, I desire to lead the holy life under your doctrine and discipline. When I had thus addressed him, Āļāra replied, the venerable friend Gautama is welcome to remain in this teaching. Of such a nature is this Dhamma that in a short time an intelligent man can realize for himself and abide in possession of what his teacher has realized as his own. After these words of encouragement, Āļāra gave him practical instructions on the doctrine.
Reassuring words. Āļāra's statement that his Dhamma, if practiced as taught, could be realized soon by oneself as one's own, was very reassuring and inspired confidence. A pragmatic doctrine is trustworthy and convincing only if it could be realized by oneself and in a short time. The sooner the realization is possible, the more heartening it will be. The Bodhisattva was thus satisfied with Āļāra's words, and this thought arose in him.
Yeah, Āļāra was a good guy. Both of the Bodhisattva's teachers were special people with nothing you can really criticize them except for the fact that they didn't have access to the higher teachings that the Bodhisattva came to find and realize to become a Buddha. Which is tragic, because I think he'll mention later on that it's why he didn't teach these two guys the first teaching. Why wasn't this teaching taught to these two teachers? Because they'd passed away and been born in the Brahma realm. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of us. But Āļāra was a good guy, and certainly this is a great thing to point out. Mahasi Sayadaw is great at this, pointing out important points in the texts. That Āļāra's statement is incredibly valuable, because there are teachings, of course, religious, spiritual teachings that are not of this sort. They promise things in the afterlife, they promise things that don't come to pass, they promise things that are out of line and out of sync and out of touch with reality. Mindfulness is a challenge because we promise happiness, right? We promise happiness and peace. And so to teach mindfulness is a real challenge, much more than teaching samatha. When you teach samatha, it's pretty simple to say, look, you practice this, you'll feel peaceful. The person practices it, they feel peaceful. Wow, that was incredible. This person really knows their stuff and is probably enlightened because they know reality and they have taught something that is leads to peace and happiness. Teaching mindfulness is more difficult, because we have to say, well, that's actually not the truest peace and happiness. And it's just as with sensual pleasure, to explain to someone that drugs and sensuality and sensual pleasures are not truly going to satisfy you is more challenging than saying, hey, eat this, drink this, experience this sensual pleasure. It's happy, right? It's pleasurable, right? It's good, right? That's very easy. And the same goes for samatha practice. It's great. That's great, right? It's wonderful. So teaching that is much simpler to that extent. I mean, it's obviously not easy to teach people to attain the jhanas, but compared to teaching mindfulness, it's a real challenge. People struggle with doubt. You have to couch it in different terms, and you have to explain the importance of being uncomfortable. It's important to be. It's not important to be stressed or in pain, suffering. Mindfulness doesn't have to be unpleasant. Well, depends. They're just words, but it has to be uncomfortable. It has to take you out of your comfort zone, explicitly, precisely because it's that comfort that feeds craving and attachment, feeds addiction, which is the true source and cause of suffering. So to find true peace and happiness, you have to be made uncomfortable. You have to be pulled out of your comfort zone. And so it's challenging to teach in that way. So rather than talk about happiness or pleasure, we point out the more immediate problem of suffering and why the Buddha phrased it in this way. I think you can see, and to some extent it's because of this, because you can't talk about experiencing peace and happiness immediately when the person is going to have to struggle with suffering. In the practice of mindfulness, they're going to have to learn to face the things that cause them suffering, and that's going to be in the beginning quite unpleasant, and it's going to be in the long term quite uncomfortable, until eventually the person lets go and then feels the peace and happiness. So how do you say, well, this is something you can realize in very short, in the immediate term? You have to instead talk about the three characteristics, right? That what you're going to see immediately is that the things that you think are a source of satisfaction are not a true source of peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. The things that you think are stable, satisfying, and controllable are not. And this is what you can realize right away. So we always talk about meditation practice in this way. We don't talk so much about happiness because it's a step removed, right? The first step is mindfulness. Mindfulness doesn't lead to happiness, it leads to wisdom, to seeing the three characteristics, which leads to letting go. It's the letting go that leads to peace and happiness. Now, obviously, through the practice of mindfulness, even day by day, a person should and will experience increased peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering, a decrease in stress, a sense of freedom, a sense of clarity. There's obviously and clearly many positive qualities that come directly with the practice, but sometimes it's difficult to see because you're not happy, you're not comfortable. Nonetheless, certainly, absolutely, mindfulness is an immediate result practice. It's something that does lead to immediate results, does lead to verifiable results. It's not something you have to take on faith, absolutely. And this is, of course, seen clearly in the verified by the speech of meditators, people who have done even our at-home course. Again and again, I hear people talking about how they can see subtle changes. Now, why I say subtle is because they're only practicing 1 or 2 hours a day. A person taking the at-home course doesn't get generally profound changes, not right away, because they're only practicing a little bit. But still, after a month or so, the meditator usually starts to say things like, people have noticed, I've noticed, I'm less reactionary, I'm less judgmental, I'm less triggered, I'm less stressed. In general, this is improving my life. I can see that benefit, and this is what gives people great confidence in the practice. Not exactly the pleasant sensations, though many people do experience pleasure. There's also a lot of discomfort and a lot of challenge, difficulty that comes in the practice of mindfulness that isn't present in the practice of samatha. Anyway, still, the point being very important that practice does lead to results, and important to understand why mindfulness doesn't lead to the same immediate pleasure necessarily that samatha does.
Bhante, I have a question. Is this paragraph saying the sooner the realization is better?
Well, it's not in such a coarse way. I mean, it's saying that it's important that a person is able to verify for themselves the results of the practice, as opposed to being told that if you do this, something great will happen sometime in the future. Like there are practices that teach you to chant a name of the Buddha, and then when you die, you'll be reborn in that Buddha's realm. This isn't really Buddhism, though they call themselves Buddhist.
I have another question from this paragraph. What I understand here is that he gave a strict method to follow, but he did not say what will be the outcome. Is it true? Like the student will have to realize.
Well, the point is, it doesn't specify exactly. My guess is that he was pretty explicit about what the results were going to be, and he was there with the Bodhisattva, explaining to him the very precise method. But the text purposefully doesn't go into detail because it's not Buddhism. We're not interested in spreading Āļāra's teaching because it's not the Buddha's teaching. We're just giving a narrative account of what happened. So the texts don't.
So that's not the case for all the teachers, that they don't say what will be the outcome, especially for the meditation teachers, because we have our techniques.
No, I mean, I don't know whether he did or not. We don't really know, but and there's no sense that he kept it hidden or he didn't know or anything like that. Clearly, the sense is that he did know because he had attained it himself.
Thank you.
It is not by mere faith that Āļāra announces that he has learned the Dhamma. Āļāra has surely realized the Dhamma himself. He knows and understands it.
Yeah, I mean, technically someone could read books and teach meditation, and theoretically their students could attain even enlightenment, because there's not the person's teaching, they're passing on the Buddha's teaching. But I think that what he says at the end is important. It would be hard to depend upon them because the person themselves would just be guessing or providing, parroting teaching that they themselves weren't familiar with, and certainly uninspiring because there's no feeling that the person themselves has practiced those teachings. So hard to inspire students if one hasn't practiced oneself.
He then approached where Āļāra Kālāma was and inquired of him whether the realm of nothingness, which he had claimed to have realized himself and live in possession of, was the same stage which Bodhisattva had now reached. Āļāra replied, "This is as far as the Dhamma leads, of which I have declared that I have realized and abide in its possession, the same stage as friend Gautama has reached." Then he uttered these words of praise. Friend Gautama is a supremely distinguished person. The realm of nothingness is not easily attainable. Yet friend Gautama has realized it in no time. It is truly wonderful. Fortunate we are that we should light upon such a distinguished ascetic companion as your reverence. As I have realized the Dhamma, so you have realized it too. As you have learned it, so I have learned it to the same extent as you. Friend Gautama is my equal in Dhamma. We have a large community here. Come, friend, let us together direct this company of disciples.
wasn't even conceited or attached to his position as a teacher. Really a great guy, and it's such a shame that he wasn't the Buddha's first disciple. Wasn't the first person to understand, or one of the first people to understand the Buddha's teaching. He's still up in the Brahma realms, I think, Āļāra, even today. Certainly still up in the Brahma realms, unable to appreciate the Buddha's teaching. So the formless realm of nothingness, there's not an ability to practice the Dhamma.
Bhante, are you saying they were free from, I mean, he was free from conceit? Or it was just...
Well, he clearly wasn't that conceited. I mean, a lot of people are quote unquote free from conceit. I mean, not everyone is conceited. Some people have an unconceited nature, where other people are quite conceited.
Yes, thank you.
Well, even if you attend the Rupa jhanas, your hindrances are subdued, even though conceit is not.
Yeah, it's probably, I was thinking it's related to his attainments, but nonetheless, there were, like Sanjaya was a horrible teacher. Sariputta, Upatissa and Kolita's teacher was a fool. But Āļāra Kālāma was a true spiritual practitioner, even though he never got to the point of practicing to see clearly, never gained the deep wisdom. He did gain the wisdom of jhanas, and he appears to have been a fairly level-headed individual. I mean, for someone to immediately, see someone better than them and offer them to share, to be the co-leader. I guess you could have a dig at him and say, hey, you should really just why didn't he give it over completely to the Bodhisattva? Because as he said, the Bodhisattva attained it so quickly. Should have just given it. So maybe he was a little bit conceited, actually, rather than immediately just saying, "Oh, you're obviously more potent spiritually than I am. You should be the leader." Which the next guy actually does, because the Buddha surpasses him, as we'll read next week.
Or maybe to share the work, since there was a large community of students.
Well, that's true.
Bhante.
But I don't think so, really. I think it would have been, I think if he had truly appreciated the Bodhisattva, I mean, obviously, if he had known he was a Bodhisattva and was completely free, I don't know if it's conceit or not, but possibly conceit. We don't, I mean, this is obviously an ancient text. We have no idea how it actually was, but could potentially have been a conceit that he didn't just immediately say, hey, you're the head now. And it's not just conceit. That was just one thing I was throwing out. It can also be greed, because as a leader, you, of course, get a lot of prestige and support, and your students and their families support you. He would have been quite wealthy, quite well taken care of. So to give all that up, it's not just conceit. It can also be greed for the station of a teacher.
Also, conceit comes in different forms. Thinking that somebody is your equal is also a form of conceit.
Yeah, I mean, like Edit, you guys are reading too much into it. I'm not talking about deeper technical conceit. I'm talking about someone being conceited. It's just a way of talking about someone if they're attached to, I'm better than you. Like Uraveda Kassapa, who was so conceited. Even when the Bodhisattva was, even when the Buddha was showing him all these incredible feats of spiritual power, He says, "Oh, he's very powerful. It's too bad he's not an arahant like me." Until finally the Buddha gets fed up and says, "Look, you're not an arahant. You're not on the path to becoming an arahant. You don't even know what it means to be an arahant." He has to hit him directly because conceit is so pernicious.
Bhante, what is the state of nothingness? How does it feel? Is it like no thoughts arrive in the meditation stage?
So it's
And
an
does it also,
experience of there is nothing. You have it's a sense that there is nothing. Like sitting here, we have a sense that there's many things. In fact, there's so many that it's hard to even sense individual things. We're just bombarded by things. Sights and sounds and smells and tastes and feelings and thoughts. But a person in this realm of nothingness only has the sense of there being nothing. Very subtle and deep and profound attainment. Not something easy to even understand because we're just so bombarded by things. And you can understand it by the progression. You get to the point where there's unlimited consciousness, and you have a sense that your consciousness is unlimited, and it's without bound. And then sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. First, it's unlimited space. First, it's unlimited something. You practice meditation. Okay, I'll start from the beginning. You practice meditation based on an object, and you extend that object to infinity, and then you have a sense of an infinite object, infinite something. It can be infinite whiteness, for example, the color white, just infinite, an infinitude of whiteness. And then you let go of the whiteness, and you just have this sense of the infinite space that it took up. And so then you're in the realm of, or the sphere of infinite space. And then you give up the space, and you're only aware of that. You focus more on the fact that you're even aware of that infinitude, which is an infinitude of consciousness. And that's another deeper, so you get to the next level of subtlety, where you discard even the space, and you just have infinitude of consciousness. Once you're the infinitude of consciousness, the idea is that you've given up infinite things, everything except consciousness. You've given it, you've discarded, and there's only, because it's infinite, it's like the whole universe is just your consciousness, or you have a universe of consciousness. And once you give that up, that's when you enter into nothingness, because you've successively discarded the layers of thingness, or of things. First of all, an object, the object that was everything in your universe, then the space that it took up, then the consciousness that was even aware of that space. So all there was that consciousness, and once you've given that up, you feel like there's really nothing. You just have a perception of nothingness. And then you can even give that up, which we'll learn about next week. And once you've given up that perception of nothingness, there's hard to say there is or isn't anything. And so it has a name that's very sort of ambivalent, neither perception nor non-perception. It's just so subtle that you can't even really say there's perception. There is, but it's hard to really say that there is, so it's neither nor.
thank you, Bhante.
Since we've hit the hour, we will stop our reading for today. Thank you everyone for reading. And now is the time for the Q&A. So the YouTube chat, you can start asking questions, and we will start reading them once we have some questions. If there are no questions, you can just close your eyes and meditate. And also for the Discord community, if you have any questions now, you can go ahead and ask them now.
Bhante, the first question we have is, what sort of karma leads to suicide?
So, okay, important that you understand what the words that you're using. Kamma means action. So when you say kamma, it's somewhat vague. What exactly you're talking about is unclear, because action is kamma, so suicide is kamma. Technically, it's from a Buddha in Buddhist doctrine. It's not the actual act of suicide; it's the mind's volition, the push to commit suicide, the drive towards it. But that's just the technicality, and in Buddhism we also talk about the action itself. So killing yourself is kamma, it is action. Now, what leads to that? You can still say that kamma leads to it. That means is the habits of action, meaning the action that you perform again and again, that leads you to think that suicide is the answer. And there's a lot in there. One aspect of it is the delusion that leads you to think that suicide could actually solve anything, that killing yourself would provide any benefit. And usually the answer, the benefit that you see is because of the view that it's the end. When you kill yourself, that's it. You put an end to suffering, which is delusion. I mean, it's wrong. It's wrong view. And that's quite dangerous. But building that up over your life, there's a lot of karma involved there, meaning a lot of actions you take to reaffirm that view. A lot of mental determination, thinking, yes, if I kill myself, that will be the end. And that thought, that determining is a karma itself, a bad karma. So it's that bad karma of thinking that suicide is the answer that leads to suicide. Well, there's others as well. There's a lot involved there. Obviously, greed and anger will lead you to want to commit suicide more than without them. If you didn't have any greed or anger, the delusion that thinking that suicide would solve your problems wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't lead you to want to kill yourself. It has to be triggered by greed and anger. Usually both. So you wish your life were different. You yearn for something that you don't have, and you feel anger, things like depression, sadness, self-hatred that lead you to want to kill yourself. This sort of despondency, hopelessness. But it's not true hopelessness. It's hopelessness in the sense that you feel like the things you want, there's no hope that you'll get them. But true hopelessness is when you don't hope for them in the first place. You don't want for them in the first place. True hopelessness is a good thing. Yeah, suicide. I mean, I think even with the delusion, as I said, the delusion of thinking that it's an answer, wouldn't be enough if there wasn't a great intense amount of greed and anger, which is karma. So greed, every moment of greed is a karma. So if you build that up, it becomes habitual. When you get angry again and again, when you have craving again and again, and you seek it, you search for the source of your desire again and again, it leads to such yearning and such aversion that person would be inclined towards taking drastic measures and just thinking this life is worthless. There can also be some tangent of wisdom where through the practice of meditation and mindfulness, even those bad habits have an opportunity, because the truth is that, well, there isn't much satisfying in life, and if you see that without freeing yourself from intense states of greed and anger at first, meditation could lead someone to to follow after those states of greed and anger and delusion and kill themselves. I mean, you don't hear about meditators committing suicide. It's not really a common thing, but the point is, just because you start practicing meditation doesn't mean you're immediately a great person. You can have a lot of bad habits left over. So a person prone or inclined to suicide could, without care, be triggered. I don't think it really happens. Usually mindfulness is so mild and harmless that it usually, of course, leads you to have less sense of despair. And so you're less likely to kill yourself, I would say. But what I mean is, seeing the hopelessness of life is not exactly false. And so some of that can come from Buddhist practice. And theoretically, there are cases of monks, stories of monks in the texts that ended up killing themselves. Still, it's not the answer. Not that they did it and that therefore it's a good thing. It's they did it and that was their mistake, thinking that that was going to benefit them.
Bhante, the next question is, I see some Buddhist teachers online who say that these deep meditation states do not lead to liberation, and the practitioner shouldn't waste time on them. Is this true?
Well, they don't lead in and of themselves to liberation. Whether someone should, it's not a waste of time, but it's a lot of time. And it's to some extent a roundabout way to the goal. The real problem is that it's so roundabout for some people that they never actually get around to practicing what truly does lead to the goal. That's the biggest sort of concern. But putting that aside, they are a valid precursor practice. After practicing them, one's practice of mindfulness is stronger and more successful because one has the deep states to fall back on. The real problem is that people don't just fall back on them, they rely on these states, and it's very hard to get such people to let go of those states. So many people I've had over the years come to practice and don't like this practice because it forces them to give up those states. I don't tell them you must give it up, but we tell them to be mindful of those states, and that's uncomfortable. Once you're mindful of these states that you rely upon, you see, you're confronted by the fact that they're impermanent, unsatisfying, uncontrollable, which is the truth about them. But that's not how you see them, and that's not how you want them to be. You're trying to make them stable, satisfying, controllable. And so it's quite common for people to get stuck on that because they're headed in the wrong direction and they've never really seen the three characteristics or have any inclination to see the three characteristics. They have what feels like the goal of the holy life. So just it's hard to get people to go to the next stage. But putting that aside, the Buddha enjoined these practices, said they're great for preparing yourself to practice mindfulness. It just takes a lot of work and it's hard to do. It's hard to do it all. A lot of people don't really have the perfections required to do the full path in that way. But no, they're not wrong. They're not a waste of time. Just some people might say it like that because you could do it more quickly if you just practice mindfulness. If you just practice the four foundations of mindfulness, probably would be quicker in most cases.
Bhante, the next question is, I am interested in practicing the meditation you teach, but I don't know how likely it is that I will ever be able to go on a retreat or find a teacher in person. Should I still do it anyway?
Yes, any moment of mindfulness is a great thing. You don't have to You don't have to go on a retreat to see the benefit. We have an at-home course. I don't know if you're aware of that, but this is what we recommend for everyone, is to practice at home, sign up for our at-home course, meet with a teacher once a week, practice at least an hour a day, half walking, half sitting. So that's just 15 minutes walking, 15 minutes sitting in the morning, and then 15 minutes walking, 15 minutes sitting in the evening. If you can do that, you can do the bare minimum to begin to follow this practice. That being said, after people have done that course, which takes several months, the next thing I always say is, well, your next step is to find a way to come and do an actual course, because it's, of course, so much more valuable to practice intensively if you have the opportunity.
The next question is, will a Vipassana meditator at some point experience the nothingness you just explained if he or she has parami from previous lives?
Not likely. Possible, but not likely. What does happen, I think, is some people practice incorrectly. They stop practicing and they start taking up their own methods, and then lots of strange things can happen, and one of those things is certain states of jhana. But getting to the state of nothingness, you'd have to be pretty... It's not something that you just fall into. You have to be dedicated to that practice, the practice that leads there.
The next question. Sometimes during formal meditation, it seems like the noting is really quiet in the mind, almost imperceptible, but the perception of the object seems fine. Should I just note knowing when it happens?
So quietude is a common object that meditators fail to note. If you feel quiet, you should actually be noting that feeling of quiet. And you feel quiet, say quiet, quiet. It's a very common omission or oversight for meditators. Passaddhi. Passaddhi means tranquility. Quietude. And it can be noted like anything else. Keep saying quiet, quiet. If you like it, you might notice that you like it. You can note liking, liking. Yeah, you can also note knowing. If you know that that the noting is quiet, that's also true. Note the fact that you're aware that it's quiet.
Bhante, the next question is, if we keep the 8 precepts on Uposatha days, is eating 1 meal a day or many meals before noon better?
Generally, people recommend 2 meals. Why? Because if you're used to 3 or even 4 meals, eating 1 meal is going to be a real challenge. If you can eat 1 meal, that's great. I mean, it's what the Buddha enjoined of the monks. But it's rare to see that even in Thailand, where they do this every week. Some people will practice the Uposatha every week. They will eat 2 meals. I mean, most of the monks in Thailand, the ones who keep the rules, will still eat 2 meals a day. It's rare for monks to only eat 1 meal a day. What the Buddha recommended, what we see in the Vinaya, is he recommended rice porridge in the morning, like just rice and boiled rice and water, like a lot of water, a little bit of rice. And rice that this, I guess it's special. I don't know how they make it, but it gets kind of like porridge, rice porridge, in the morning. So he did recommend that outside of the 1 meal, and then just 1 meal at sometime later after alms round. So I would say around 9 or 10 a.m. But for someone who is used to a lot more food and a lot more meals, I think it's fair to recommend a breakfast and lunch. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you get used to it, you can take it as a higher practice to eat 1 meal and say, okay, I think I could go for just 1 meal and try that as well. It's certainly a valuable training because it's challenging. In Buddhism, we try to challenge ourselves. Challenge is valuable, challenge is good. We don't shy away from a challenge. So these kind of challenges are valuable, worth trying if you feel up to them. If you look at it as a challenge, it gets easier rather than being afraid of how could I possibly only eat 1 meal? You think, well, it's a challenge, I can do that. Certainly you won't die from it.
Bhante, the Dhutangas are recommended mostly for monks, that is not for lay people.
No, lay people can follow some of them. Of course, not all of them. Visuddhimagga even mentions that some of them are for lay people. I think, unless I'm mistaken, but certainly lay people can keep many of them. Nesachika, why would that just be for monks, right? Some like Yata Santutikanga, maybe not. Like just sleeping wherever because you're a lay person, you have your own bed. You can't just go sleeping wherever. I mean, that's actually not a difficult one. But some of them, like the robes, obviously. Just having 3 robes. But there were lay people who kept the 8 precepts their whole life, I think, even in the time of the Buddha. Some that probably only ate 1 meal.
Bhante, we have our next question. I practice Vipassana, but I also have the habit of smoking cannabis and find it very hard to let go. And because it hurts a precept, I see that it sabotages me. Should I just continue with the practice?
You should continue with the practice, but you can't continue if you're taking cannabis. It's breaking the 5th precept for sure. You can't cultivate Vipassana without keeping the 5 precepts. We required of anyone who takes our courses, even the at-home course, we require that people keep the 5 precepts. If you're smoking cannabis, you're breaking that precept. So yeah, you have that one is like a non-starter. There are some where you can say, well, limit entertainment, right? Limit beautification, but it's not breaking the precepts for the at-home course. But the 5 precepts are non-negotiable. You keep them or you don't practice. So you shouldn't stop practicing, but can't if you're not keeping the 5 precepts, you're not really a meditator. No matter how much you say, I'm meditating, I'm meditating. Not without keeping the 5 precepts. Those are things you have to quit cold turkey. Like cigarettes. Cigarettes, probably not. Probably you could get away with, in the beginning, you could get away with some amount of cigarettes smoke. But not marijuana, it's too much. Especially if you're addicted to it. That's a real bad sign. Something you're going to have to quit cold turkey. I was smoking cannabis like 2 or 3 days before I went to practice meditation for the first time. Not that that means anything. I guess the only thing it means is that I do have experience with it and am aware of the effects of it to some extent. But I was in Thailand, and it just was in a place where they were smoking it. In 1999, December 31st, I smoked cannabis just before the year 2000. And then like on the 5th of January, I went to practice meditation. I didn't know anything about the 5 precepts. I didn't know that you had to keep the 5 precepts to practice mindfulness. That's what I learned when I went to the meditation center.
Bhante, the next question is, I occasionally catch a sense of self. This feeling of being unsure leads to confusion, and I become aware of it. Is noting identification for that sense of self correct?
Could be. I mean, it's probably not. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's not terrible, but much better is to note even just the knowing, the awareness of that experience. But the best at that moment is to note the confusion. Because if you're confused, you're not going to have a clarity of mind. I mean, you're not going to be able to note anything else if you're confused or doubt or just, like when the mind is not firmly established in reality. So note the confusion, say confused, confused. That's enough.
The next question, as per my birth chart prediction, my studies/academics will not be good. This is creating anxiety in me whenever I study. I have been doing meditation for 1 month. How do I handle this anxiety and study?
Well, there's a lot there. I mean, okay, so we have to question whether your birth chart is accurate. That's the first thing. Now, I don't know whether birth charts have any accuracy. I don't know whether astrology has any basis in reality. My guess is that it probably doesn't, to the extent that it is taught and practiced today. My guess is that there is some amount, some way of connecting the conditions of a person's birth and the circumstances of a person's birth to the nature of their life, to some extent. I doubt that there are many people, if anyone, who is able to do that outside of like the Buddha and some arahants. And maybe some people outside of the Buddha's teaching, but very, very rare. So that's the first thing, is that you should probably rest assured that it's mostly garbage, it's mostly bunk, and mostly the people who tell you these things have no idea what they're talking about. They consult books that were written by people who consulted books that were written by people who consulted people who talked about these things in ancient times. It's just a terrible game of telephone, the blind leading the blind. And so the most part, it's just charlatans and deluded people guiding other people who are either charlatans or ignorant. I wouldn't put much stock in things like birth charts. That's the first thing I would say. Not that I dismiss them completely. I just think if there's much truth or any truth to it, you're probably not going to get it. You're going to get vague ideas of things like my studies academics will not be good, whatever that means, that are probably have no relationship to you whatsoever. The second thing you have to ask is how important having good academics is. It is important. It's very important in a worldly sense. But once you have put your effort into academics, the effort that you can, maybe you still don't get a very good result. That's not the most important thing in life. It is important that you do the right thing, that you work hard, that you strive for goals that will better you. And so something like academics is valuable. I mean, it's in a worldly sense, it's certainly a good idea and a good thing to commit yourself to. But you committing yourself to it doesn't necessarily mean that that work is going to translate into A, good grades, B, a good job based on those grades, C, money based on that job, D, happiness based on that money, right? Or let's say D, E, and F, and G, and all these things is the progression that it will lead to in your life, whether it leads you to a stable situation or whether it leads you to finding a marriage partner who appreciates you for your station in life, because sometimes job is what they look at. Does my potential partner have a good job, and so on and so on. I mean, there's so many variables. But at the end, the Z, the last letter in that progression is happiness. Does it lead to happiness? And the answer is it can't. No matter what that academic studies, good or not good, might lead to, what it can't lead to at the end is happiness. It can't lead to true peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. And that makes it not the most important thing. Most important thing is your state and your quality of mind. So, this anxiety is important. The most important of what you've talked about is anxiety, and you have to divorce that from all this talk about birth charts and academics and study, even meditation. You have to divorce it from meditation, saying, you have to stop saying, if you are saying that I can't meditate because I'm too anxious, or my meditation is suffering from anxiety. Anxiety is your reality at that moment, not all the time, but it arises. It's a part of it's a reality for you at certain moments. And at those moments, the only thing you should be concerned with is the anxiety. That's it, with no connection to anything. Not you, not your life, not your studies, not your birth charts, not your future, not your happiness, not even your meditation. You should only you shouldn't connect the anxiety to anything. You should only connect it with mindfulness, in the sense of when there's anxiety, you be mindful of the anxiety. That's it. You stop trying to make it go away. You stop trying to fix it. You stop trying to find a way to not be anxious. The anxiety is your whole world at that moment. It's the only important thing at that moment. That's how you practice mindfulness. That's what the most important thing. That's the answer to what you're saying, what you're asking. It will get easier. I mean, that being said, it will get easier as you practice. So why we practice focusing on the stomach is to teach us how to do this. When you focus on the stomach, it's easier than focusing on the anxiety. So over time, when you're better able to cultivate mindfulness focused on the stomach, you eventually become better and better able to apply mindfulness to things like anxiety.
The next question is, Bhante, when I meditate, my noting jumps from object to object, like noting pain, to hearing, to thinking, which makes it take a long time to return to my stomach. Is this wrong practice?
Yeah, I mean, not technically, but it's a wrong technique. You're much better to note at that moment distracted, and then just go back to the stomach. It's not magic. The real wrongness is trying to catch everything, thinking that mindfulness is about noting absolutely everything that comes, and that somehow that's going to magically lead to some benefit. All you're teaching yourself now is non-self, that your mind's not under your control. Also impermanence, also suffering. You're teaching yourself the three characteristics. So there's value in that experience, but it's not right technique. Better technique is to note when there's many things. General rule of thumb is when there's many things to note, you should instead note distracted, and then bring the mind back to the main object of the body. Try to get in that habit, and it will help your mind calm down a little bit. Rather than jumping, there's no benefit to catching everything. Just noting anything is enough, and noting one thing is better than noting many, many, many things. Generally speaking, doesn't mean that you can't note multiple things. It just means when there's many, many, like you're talking about, it gets to be too much, and you should instead note distracted. Note the state of mind. You can also note emotions. There can be liking and disliking, and those are important.
Bhante, the next question is, can you give some tips to stop the inner monologue that leads to inner silence during meditation?
I mean, some tips that lead to inner silence? I mean, that's not what we practice. Not in the way you're thinking about it. The inner monologue, what you're talking about is thoughts, right? And thoughts are the nature of the mind. The goal of mindfulness is not to stop thinking. It's to be aware of the thinking. When you're thinking, you note thinking. When you're thinking a lot, you note distracted. But the drive for it to stop is just greed, anger, and delusion. The greed is that you want it to stop. The anger is the disliking of when there is a monologue. And the delusion is thinking that somehow you can just make it go away forever. I mean, technically you can. You can only do that by attaining nibbana, which is a much more involved process than just making it stop. Making it stop is delusion based on self, thinking that somehow you can control it. Trying to understand the opposite. In fact, what you're realizing is already the three characteristics. As you practice, you see, I can't make it stop. You have to go with that. You have to appreciate that that's true and inevitable and unavoidable. You can't make it stop. It's a good reason to continue practicing until you can let it go. Stop getting upset about it. Because otherwise you're in for a lot of suffering.
Bhante, the next question is, sometimes my mind thinks a lot, and I find it hard to keep focused during my vipassana practice. Would you recommend practicing samatha meditation, just focusing on breath, and then coming back to vipassana?
So again, keeping focus is not the goal. Yes, in samatha practice, that's the goal. So samatha practice is much better for cultivating focus. But in mindfulness, the focus should be on the thoughts. So if you're thinking a lot, the best thing to do is to note distracted, and to gain the skill of noting individual thoughts. Sometimes at the beginning when you first start thinking, sometimes when you're halfway through a thought, sometimes at the very end when you realize I've been thinking for a long time. Just note it as thinking. So it's again sort of to some extent this misunderstanding of the goal based on our delusion of seeking out things that are stable, satisfying, and controllable, based on our inability to confront and face the three characteristics. We instead want things to be stable, satisfying, and controllable. But what you're experiencing through the practice of vipassana is impermanent suffering and non-self. That's not what you want to experience, so it makes you uncomfortable. And that discomfort is important, again, because it helps you let go. Much more challenging practice than it appears at first sight.
The next question, Bhante, how do I overcome itching or the desire to move my sleeping legs?
So we're not really trying to overcome anything. The only things we're trying to overcome, you could say, is greed, anger, and delusion. Itching is not something we're trying to overcome. If you're itching, note itching. If you want to scratch, you can say wanting to scratch. If you scratch, you can say scratching. If you want to move your legs, you can say wanting to move your legs. If you move your legs, you can say wanting to move, moving. As long as you do it mindful, you're on the right track. It's not about fixing or changing things. That all comes by itself. Because eventually you're going to move the leg again and again and again, and you're going to lose interest in moving the leg eventually. But only if you're really mindful. If you're very mindful, you will start to see the meaninglessness of things like itching, scratching, things like moving your legs when they fall asleep and so on. Your mind will lose interest and the desire will start to fade.
The next question, Bhante, isn't the inner voice also just an illusion creating a self, and thinking with it then forms clinging to self? Should one notice this or accept it as a necessary part of consciousness?
All these things you're talking about are not truly what's going on. What's going on is there is thought. Right. Well, you're kind of getting it, I guess. You say it's an illusion, but my point being you're overthinking it. So keep it simple. When there is an inner voice can be two things. One, you can actually hear a voice, your own voice or somebody else's. Or two, what you're referring to is thoughts. And if there's thoughts, you just say thinking. But if you actually hear a voice, because you're using that word, you can say hearing. But it's one or the other. It's either thinking or it's hearing, and that's it. There's nothing else, and you don't have to make a big deal out of it. Keep it simple. Vinyate vinyatamatang bhavisati. What is cognized is only that which is cognized. In other words, what you think is only that which is thought, or is only thought. It's only thinking. Say thinking. Thinking or wondering or doubting. That's enough.
The next question, Bhante. I have a scar on my forehead that makes me feel self-conscious, and my brother keeps teasing me even though I've asked him to stop. I feel bad about how I look. What can I do?
Well, have you read our booklet on how to meditate? That might be a good start. If you've done that, you can take our at-home course. We can teach you how to deal with, first of all, the feeling bad, because that's the most important. When you feel bad, that's an emotion of disliking, an emotion of anger-based. And that anger will lead you to do and say things that cause stress and suffering for you and for others as well, that lead to a lot of problems. But if, on the other hand, you're mindful of the disliking of the scar, disliking of the words, disliking of the consequences of getting upset, just note the disliking, be free from it. But I do recommend, if you haven't, to take the at-home course. It will help you learn these sorts of things. It's free. I'm not shilling something here that's going to cost you money. Just free.
The next question, Bhante. I think I was a bit confused during the last part of the reading. Is nothingness some level of jhana, and does it have nothing to do with vipassana meditation?
Yes and yes. Part of samatha practice and has nothing to do directly with vipassana practice.
We have another question. Ajahn, I have osteoporosis. Should I meditate under the effects of painkillers because it is easier to settle? Or should I meditate on the real pain even though I can't do it for long?
Well, some mix of both, I would think, and some level of pain management. From Buddhist perspective, I think it's fair to say, that's maybe, let's put it this way, from the perspective of a modern Buddhist meditation teacher, which I think you could say I am. you want to manage the pain. So having it be overwhelming is not going to be to your benefit, but having no pain is also going to be very much not to your benefit. And it actually is to your benefit to allow some pain. Not bring about, you're not trying to create pain, but to stop running away from it. You should make the pain manageable to whatever extent that is, and then slowly, through mindfulness, increase your tolerance to pain until you don't need painkillers theoretically at all. Now, physically, I don't know. I mean, if there's really extreme pain, it may be that it's just physically impossible, but also quite likely that it's not physically impossible, and through training, you can come to tolerate more and more pain. A mistake people sometimes make is thinking that you should do everything you can to not have pain in meditation. But pain is very, 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 very much a part of the practice of seeing reality clearly, because pain is a part of reality. And if you never have pain, that's fine. But if you are constantly running away from pain, chasing away, avoiding pain, then it's still very much a part of your reality that you're not facing. And facing things is explicitly, directly the core practice of mindfulness. Facing everything, pain, pleasure, calm, good thoughts, bad thoughts, doesn't matter.
The next question, Bhante. How does the Sangha regard disciplines like mathematics and logic? Since mathematical principles do not arise or pass away, could they be considered unconditioned phenomena outside of samsara?
They are outside of samsara because they're outside of reality. They're unconditioned because they're not real. That's all. There's nothing special about them. They're certainly not they're certainly not like nibbana, but they're just not real. I mean, nature doesn't care that we have numbers. We can count things. I can count fingers on my hand. That has nothing to do with reality. It's not real at all. You can say I have 5 fingers, but that's absolutely just a concept. There's nothing 5 about these at all. There's no 5 inherent in these at all. The speed of light is c, right? It's a constant. That number has nothing to do with reality. It's absolutely unreal. Reality can be expressed using numbers, using words, as I'm doing right now, right? But none of these are real whatsoever. Sorry, and that's not actually sufficient. I have to further say that words can be names of realities, but they can also be names of concepts. So 5 is a concept, 5 is also the name of that concept. The concept that there are 5 is a concept. The name 5 is the name of that concept. But seeing is a reality. And this is important. This is an important point. Seeing is a reality. The word seeing is a concept. So we use concepts, but we in mindfulness practice as well. The word is a concept. The word seeing, that's a concept. But seeing is real. So the word points to a reality. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doesn't point to a reality. It points to a concept. So it's a concept, the name, that points to the concept 5, which is not a part of reality. I don't know if that helps you at all, but it's not. Hopefully that helps. That being said, we think of them as practically useful. I mean, most scientists do. Buddhists do as well. Monks have to build monasteries sometimes, some monks. And so they use things like trigonometry. We have one novice monk coming on Monday who's going to help build a roof for our head monk above me on the second floor. He's going to live above me, hopefully, if he agrees to it. We're building him a room. And the roof, I thought, well, this is going to take some trigonometry. I wonder if this monk knows trigonometry. He must, right? Because you have to calculate angles and stuff. So useful, but not real. And therefore not ultimately useful. They can't free you from suffering is really the point.
Bhante, the next question. What are the benefits of smiling while meditating?
Have you read our booklet on how to meditate? You should read it and do our at-home course. Maybe you'll find the answer yourself. Let's start there. If you've done the at-home course, come back and ask me again if you still have that question.
Bhante, the next question. I see a connection to everything I see. It starts by being much more alive. My thought is that I see what really is and not my view as a person. Can you say something about this?
You're just interpreting what you see, that you're not actually seeing any of that. The only thing you see is sight, is light. That's all you see. So I don't know if you're talking about actual vision, or I assume you are, right? You're talking about actual vision. But you have to be a little more specific there. But regardless, whether you think it, whether you see it, whether you just meet it or come in contact with it, even mentally or physically, there's very little that you can actually say is real. The rest is just interpretation. The reality is that seeing is seeing, hearing is hearing, smelling is smelling, tasting is tasting, feeling is feeling, thinking is thinking. And that's really all there is. Really quite simple. The problem, and it is the problem, is that we make more of things than they actually are. It's not just seeing, it's much more. It's me, it's mine, it's under my control, it's good, it's bad, it's right, it's wrong. We create all of this as interpretation. Some of it's okay, some of it is innocent, but a lot of it isn't. It's what leads us to hate things, to love things, to want things, to believe things, cling to things. When seeing is just seeing, there's no me, there's no mine, there's no self. There's just seeing. There's no problem. This is the end of suffering.
Bhante, we've reached the hour, but do you have time for one more question?
Go for it.
To what extent can mindfulness address suffering for lay people? Its depth may be inaccessible to many, making preliminary supports necessary. Wouldn't recognizing this be the more skillful approach?
So the short answer is no. Because by your logic, by that logic, mosquitoes require much more support. And therefore the skillful thing would be to do whatever it takes to make mosquitoes get to the point where they can practice meditation. I guess that's pushing it too far, but the analogy holds. humans. Not all humans are even able to possibly practice meditation. So even if you were to limit what you're proposing to those who are capable, I mean, I guess the first problem is, what does it mean that someone is capable of realizing the truth? The Buddha was confronted with this question, and he asked himself, why would I teach? Because it's, so the point I'm getting to is that what you're suggesting causes fatigue and bother. I mean, it's going out of one's way. You're proposing that one should go out of one's way to do what it takes to make mindfulness accessible to many. And that is not the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching is one should be one's own refuge, one should work for one's own salvation, and that's it, that's all, that's enough, that's the goal. As you do that, absolutely, you will meet with other people, you probably should engage in teaching them. It's for your own benefit, it's for their benefit, it's just generally the right thing to do, it's a part of the path. But that doesn't mean you go out of your way to try and make the Dhamma accessible, make mindfulness accessible. You really don't. So the logic of saying that these people are unable to benefit, I should go out of my way to make it so that they can benefit from it as well, and so on. I mean, my point at the beginning was that it just has no end, and it's not sustainable, it's not the goal, it's not a valid goal. And therefore it's not the Buddha's teaching. Buddha's teaching is to practice for yourself. A good rule of thumb is to focus on those people you're in contact with. If you come in contact with them, then absolutely you have kind of you could almost say a duty to help them. But that's because you come in contact with them. And ultimately, over time, you start to lose contact with them and with most people. And rather than extending out to find more and more people who can benefit from your teachings, you go in and in and in, further and further, until people stop coming to you, or you die, one or the other. Usually the latter. It's rare to find someone where they have no contact with other people and no one looking to benefit from their acquaintance. Usually you'll meet with people trying to benefit from your acquaintance, and so the best thing you can do for them is teach them, give them what you can. So it's kind of like, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You should really help whoever you meet. The problem really is none of us are Buddhas, and none of us really have the capacity to help everyone we meet. But to the extent that you're able, the best way to live is to help everyone as best you can when you meet them, as opposed to going out of your way to help this group or that group, and so on. It's more like live your life. Let's put it that way. Live your life, and if your life involves helping this group of people or that group of people, so be it. Because you're not probably an arahant yet, it's going to be a twisty path. You'll make mistakes, you'll do the wrong thing, you'll go in the wrong direction. But through the practice of mindfulness, you'll get better and better and better until you'll be an arahant. And you won't have to worry about anything. Should I help people? Should I not help people? It just doesn't even come into your mind. You help people when the occasion arises. But having the idea that we should somehow make it more accessible, etc., etc., I mean, this is just overthinking and really misunderstanding the path, which is much more focused on, the should is only focused on your own self. You should. Appamadena sampadeta. strive for your own liberation with diligence. That's the skillful approach.
So we will end our online Dhamma group there. We've reached the second hour. Thank you so much, Bhante, for your time and answering everyone's questions. Thank you everyone as well for asking the questions and being here. We appreciate all
Thank you,
of
everyone. Looks like Anoma has joined in. Anoma Himi, that's our head monk, unless there's another Anoma Himi out there. So he's listening in. Thank you all. A lot of good questions. A lot of questions. I always appreciate that. Encouraging. If you come here and there's nobody with questions, you think, wow, that we must be doing something wrong, or the world is maybe in just such a state where no one's interested in these things anymore. But no, there's people interested and they keep coming back, which means there's some benefit. So really happy to be doing this again and appreciate all of your continued engagement. Thank you all for coming. May all of us, all the people here, all the people listening, and all of those not listening, may all beings be free from pain, free from suffering, free from sorrow, lamentation, and despair. May all beings find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Have a good week, everyone. Sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.
Sadhu, sadhu,
Thank you, Bhante.
sadhu. Thank you so much,
Sadhu.
Bhante.
Sadhu.
Thank you, everyone.